All right. Well, welcome. This season's topic or title is going to be testimony in progress. So I'm Lorana Hughes, and I am the founder of the International Welcome Center here in Ecuador. And this season series is about truth telling, and it's about healing that doesn't need to be polished to be real. And it's about hearing the testimonies of people who are still in the middle of their becoming, because that's where the power really is. And so today I'm sharing space with a woman who holds a lot, Dr. Latise Hairston. From what I searched out on the internet, she holds a PhD in leadership and policy. She's a trauma professional, a somatic practitioner, and respected voice in systems change and healing leadership. But that's not really why I invited her here today. A few weeks ago, Latise made a decision that some professionals don't make. She came herself not to facilitate or perform, but really to let herself be held and to be seen and to receive and to rest. And so we're going to be talking about what that experience has opened up and what it may have reframed or what it might have created for her to reimagine, because this healing work that we're doing, it really isn't a destination. It's a practice, it's a path, it's a lifestyle, it's a testimony in progress. So welcome, Latise. Welcome. It's good to see you again and talk to you. And thank you for making time for me today.
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the gift that you are. Now, I would start to say the work you do, but it's the gift that you are, and that you allow that gift to flow through to others from out of your own healing work. And you are certainly a gift, a friend that I consider to me now. A mentor, and I am grateful. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you. Well, then let's begin. And I thought, before the bio and really thinking about who you were before, who you are before the titles and the systems and the certifications. And so I thought I'd start with, in my first question, what first pulled you towards healing work, not as a job in your profession, but really as a personal calling? Maybe you'll give us some insight on that today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I hear you ask me that question about what my healing journey and where did it start, I would say that it started in my childhood. I grew up in an environment where my mom was a minister in the church, and then my dad was a deacon in the church. And I would say, for me, when we talk about the healing work, my dad was very quiet. I'll just say that. He was very quiet. He wasn't a preachery kind of person. He was more about what is the lived experience of how do I live this out? And so I'll just give you a couple of examples that really stand out for me as a young child. When I was, probably about 5 or 6, I remember going to the grocery store with my dad. And you know how sometimes when you're in the grocery store, you don't always get the best customer service. And my dad, who, again, was not a man of a whole lot of words, who didn't speak a whole lot. But what he would do is he would read that person's name tag, and he would look him in the eye and he would say, "How are you doing today?" Right? And I witnessed that as a young girl, not maybe understanding all of it at the time, but I would see a shift. I would see a shift in people, and sometimes just in that shift, I didn't understand it then. I understand it more now. Like, people would begin to cry. And they would say, most people, they just go by me. They don't pay attention to me, right? And people would just start pouring out their hearts. And the other thing he would say to me all the time is that you don't judge a person by a moment in time, right? And I saw that his words were healing. Just to be present, to see, right? To see another human being, to witness them was a healing process. I wouldn't say that my father was a person of perfection. Certainly that wasn't that, but he taught me those lessons, and I could see healing and how healing happened in community, not at preaching at, but being with and being seen.
I can identify with that. In my experience here, I make friends in lots of places, and one of my friends happens to be the older gentleman that delivers my gas.
Mm.
And his name is Senor Pedro. And I remember him one day saying, "Thank you for remembering my name." And
Mm.
that stuck with me.
Wow.
The small, very simple act of remembering his name and using it when I addressed him made a difference for him.
Yeah.
I can definitely identify with that. Beautiful story about your father and those lessons that you learned early.
Mhm.
But then you grew up and you evolved into more professional roles, especially in dealing with mental health space,
Yeah.
trauma, and trauma resolution work. So, how has your own journey evolved as you've taken on the professional roles in that space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, I describe it as my ongoing journey, right? I think initially I began my career in doing getting a degree in counseling. I began my career doing trauma work with those who I would say have been pushed to the margins. I don't call them marginalized because that's not their identity. People who have been actually pushed to the margins. And the truth of the matter is that I understand it more and more now is that it was out of my own trauma. So I had, as great as I talk about my dad, I also had some very traumatic experiences growing up with abuse, with neglect. I would say more emotional abuse and some physical abuse by the hands of my mom. I witnessed a lot of harm and experienced a lot of harm, and so out of that internal cry, I wanted to help others. So that's where it was really born out of, that journey of wanting to. And I would also say that, I did a lot of work then moving from individual to organizational because I saw how organizations that were supposed to help actually harmed individuals. So I wanted to have a more global impact. Now, the thing is, while I was doing all of that, I would say, there was some healing that happened. I'm gonna couch that in a very light way. Let me put it that way. But it was not purposeful. So it was all externalizing, right? It was my externalizing to help others. And also, since even our time together, really going back to wanting to be a good person, right? But it was against, I don't want to be like this. So it's more that rub, I want to be a good person in the world. And that was all externalizing. My journey in terms of my own healing and where I am now over the course is, I would say, not religious, but spiritual, in that is the internal, my own healing journey. And how do I show up? And how do I show up in an authentic way? And so that's been, I would say, really on a purposeful level for the last 5 years or so. There were some tragedies and some things that's happened in my life. And it was like, yeah, what, I'm looking out and I'm trying to help other people and help and do this. And what about me? So, yeah.
Oh, that brings up a whole other question on the other end of the spectrum, because you start with kind of the things you pick up and then you move into the professional space. But you said yes to this retreat
Yeah.
and to yourself specifically.
Yeah.
What made you do that at this point in your life, at this point in your healing journey?
Yeah. So, as we talked about before, that I am part of a group of women, right, who are really the main focus around is around Black women who are looking to exit the U.S. I think that would adequately exit in some way, form, or fashion. And so I got involved in that community. Part of my journey, I will also say, is I've always been called, I would say, on a global level, right? So I've worked globally. I've held roles that took me, across the world, impact with different cultures and things like that. And so that's what drew me to that group. And then you spoke to that group. You were speaking specifically, I think it was about co-living. And when you were speaking, I mean, you were speaking to my soul, right? I'll just put it that way. You were really speaking to my soul. You talked a lot about that inner work and the healing. And I mean, it was about co-living, but not really. It was about community, but the work that we need to do, the healing that we need to do in order to be in community. And the thing is that all the themes that you talked about, all the work, or the journey and the gifts and all the things that you had gone through was to build these communities, but a healed community, right? Not a community that comes together in harm, but really, really taking a look at ourselves and looking at, and I'm also a somatic practitioner, but again, everything, let me just say this, everything, I'll have to be honest, everything that I have done and I do has always been about my own journey to healing. Always about that, right? And so it's the work that you do brings it all together, right? When we talk about the inner healing work, the trauma, the really connecting with ourselves and feelings, but also looking at, and I think this was one of the most impactful things for me in our work together, was the piece around not just what someone else did and their behaviors, but our behaviors, right? And our behaviors and how those behaviors and our thinking has resulted in losses to ourselves. And it begs the question, is this how you want to continue? And so for me, it was really about when I heard it, and then you did the 30-day challenge, and I joined that. I mean, I was traveling at the time, but I knew that's what I needed to do. And then at pretty quickly, day 2, I was like, I think I was sending a message saying, hey, how do I do a little bit more intense work with you? And yeah, so that was that's a long answer to your question.
No, I think it just paints the pictures that our lives are intertwined in ways that we cross paths and the points of connection just align. I don't know if did my mic unmute? No, we crossed paths at different times.
Yeah, it went out for a moment.
Okay. Well, I'm super glad that you shared that, because I think one of the things it points out is that there are these points of connection that happen magically, and our paths cross, and then here you are we're in Ecuador. And so that really, you've in your work, I'm sure that you've been in all kind of healing environments, clinical, maybe spiritual, professionally.
Yeah.
But this one was intentionally different.
Yeah.
And my question next, what stood out to you most during your time here at the International Welcome Center as you think through different healing environments that you've been in? What stands out for you in the experience here specifically?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I've been in lots of different healing environments. I think one of the things for me is having really, the first thing is one-on-one time, right? So that's one thing, right? Having the one-on-one time that's concentrated based on my own healing journey. The other part of I would say is, and so let me just say it. I see it actually as 3-pronged. So let me put it that way. The way I see it is, and it is first a community of care, let me just put it that way, from the initial my reaching out. So it's everything. It's living into the values, right? So from the first, the first connection when we met before I even came there, right? And learning more about me and my own journey, so it can be very, very much personalized, right? If from the basic things of like, well, what kind of things do you eat? So what are the things you like to do, right? It's a way of, it's a framing of care, right? I mean, to me, that's a grounding. So before even coming in, to open up, to be vulnerable to another human, because I mean, I never met you in person before, right? Well, I mean, quite honestly, we hadn't, before that time, we had even had a one-on-one. But the thing is, I felt your spirit. And then on a personal level, it's the care, right? And so there's an environment, there's a loving environment of care that allows for me, as just speak for me to be open and vulnerable, right? And to be able to share of myself, and not only of myself, but of some of my trauma experiences. It requires a certain environment for that to happen, but it's in everything, even in the way that you serve, right? In the foods that are prepared, in your laughter, right? You have a lot of laugh. And I love to laugh. So it's joy, and there's, freedom. And I don't know if I'm articulating that in the way that where people can really understand what that feels like. There's an energy and an environment, I think, that is so important. Sometimes we enter into spaces of healing that don't authentically feel like healing. Right? And healing is also about joy. You understand what I mean? It's also about community. It's when we go out to the markets and the people you don't necessarily know, but how you engage them in love and care, even when the language is still trying to, navigate the language differences, but you feel it and they feel it, right? To me, that's authenticity. And healing is a, like, authenticity is a breeding ground for healing. So okay, that's one pillar. This is a really long answer. But that's one pillar of it. I think the other pillar, pillar also goes with authenticity, is that you also share of yourself, right? You share of yourself, your journey, your where you go. And I go, wow, right, wow. It's the process for the work, right? So process, there's a whole structure of, certainly, for the work, and at the same time, it is in a place where it's witnessing but also relating. And so there's a power in that, without putting in your own opinions, your own, you know what I mean? It's just, okay, I relate to this part of it, right? And sharing of ourselves, yourself, in an authentic way. And the third pillar, of course, is the whole structure, right? And for me, it, from the book, from your book, Revolution Must Come to Our House, Our Home. I love the structure. It's a very structured approach that I think anyone can do, right? And in a place of honesty and truth telling. Which I actually am going to ask you a question around this, because I think this will help me. When you talk, the way you talk about trauma, now, again, I'm certified in trauma, whatever, right? But the way that you talk about trauma and your definition of trauma is very different, right? And I'll ask you if you're okay with sharing that, because that also really spoke to me and to my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in this framework, the social tech framework. It's about solutions. How do we fix it? We know what's wrong with society. We know what's wrong sometimes even in our own lives, or at least we feel it.
Yeah.
And the defining of trauma in this system, or the ground zero, where is trauma at? Where does it happen?
Mm-hmm.
Anytime my values, and those sometimes are the beliefs or expectations, the shoulds
Yeah.
that I live from.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime there's a confliction there,
Yeah.
trauma happens.
Yeah.
Doesn't qualify whether your values are sustainable or not. It simply says if you have a set of expectations or beliefs or values and they are conflicted, something goes against it, that is the point where trauma begins. It doesn't matter if someone's doing it to me or if I'm living an experience where I'm living out of alignment with my values.
Yeah.
What I say I believe and what I'm living may not be in alignment, that those become the places where trauma takes place. And that I've realized is a very different
Yes.
definition of trauma from what we typically see in mental health spaces, definitely in trauma resolution spaces. But it's been because of that reframing that it's almost saying if we can define it in a way that fits better,
Mm-hmm.
develop the tools and solutions to help us fix it better.
Yeah.
And this system really puts the control of the trauma in our lives back into our hands.
Yeah.
It lets us see very clearly and very specifically where the points of disconnection in life take place.
Yeah.
And that framing, that definition is something that is very different, especially for those in the professional space that are used to dealing with the traditional ways that we define or categorize it. So definitely, I agree with that.
Yeah. The other thing that I really love that hit home for me is that when you talk about that the trauma becomes the addiction. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's really
Sure.
different too. That's very different.
I realized as I've been working with this tool and the development process that trauma really is the addiction.
Yeah.
It's the thing that causes us to reach for, I call them drugs of choice.
Yes.
Oftentimes they're behavioral drugs of choice, but they function the same way. And if those stop working, we add things like substances or other things. But trauma causes us, triggers us into behaviors that are for the purpose of soothing the fear, the guilt, and the insecurities. Those are the big umbrellas. And so we reach for things that help us get back to one of those words, homeostasis, that sense of balance, that sense of control. I'm triggered, so I'm trying to get myself off the ledge of wherever I'm getting ready to leap to, And oftentimes when I began to recognize that those behaviors are usually the first set of drugs of choice, I realized they work the same way. I grew up and I had a family member who had an addiction to substances, heroin. And reaching for that was so that I don't feel the stuff that I may not be able to deal with or just don't want to. To get those emotions, shove them back down, stuff those emotions so I don't have to sit with them. They become the thing that I reach for. But then I began to realize just as strong as that addiction is my addiction to perfection, to type A personality, working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. In my logical mind, that's crazy. It's crazy. It's detrimental to myself, yet I do this thing that's poison to my life and to my very existence. I reach for these behaviors for the exact same reason that someone would reach for alcohol or substances. The other part of that is that because these aren't things that we categorize as bad. If it was crack, somebody would say, oh no, that's bad. But when it's shopping,
Yeah.
When it's the stuff around me, when it's my education, when
Yeah.
it's, the accolades, when it's my job title, when it's the look at what I got, look at how big it is, look at how many of my got. It can be any of those things that by themselves may not be wrong or bad, but if I use them as a drug of choice, then that's what they are. They become the addiction in my life. And I began to realize that sometimes it's the behavior that is the drug of choice. And this process helps to be able to see those things. And it works to do the healing of the core, what's at the core of causing that need, the trigger. Because if we heal the trigger, we heal the need for that addictive behavior. I call it drugs of choice, because part of this is it's the same detrimental. One may affect my body differently. Overspending, I think that was one of the things that kind of came up in our conversations. Overspending may not do my body harm like heroin or alcohol might, but the addiction is just as strong. And it may be just as difficult to let it go until we do real healing. And so, and the other part is about stigmatizing. My drug ain't no better than your drug. They both damage us. Let's stop competing in our damage. Well, my drug's not as significant as yours. No, the reality is if it's a drug, it's poison. Anything that we're using as a drug of choice is poison. And it could be money, alcohol, sex, position, power, control, image, stuff. It doesn't matter. It's damaging. It damages us personally if we're using it in that way. And the addiction is just as strong. And so we really look at identifying our own personal drugs of choice, because there's not a rule list I can give you to say these things are wrong, these things are bad. Nope. It could be exercise. No, exercise is not a bad thing. Are you using it as your drug of choice? Because if so, it has an impact on you that's causing harm. And so it's being able to identify the things that we're using, coping mechanisms. That's a nice way of saying drugs of choice.
Right.
It's what are we doing to help us suppress sometimes those feelings. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to feel it. And then we stuff it, and it becomes the dis-ease within us in some form or fashion. And so that for me really is the visual. It also is the reminder that my drug of choice ain't no worse than yours. And it helps me to maintain that sense of both compassion and humility in my healing journey. To say that heroin may not be my issue, but I got my own drugs of choice too. And so it built into this system, the vocabulary even built the opportunity to lean into the side of compassion and identification. Me too. Your drug of choice might have been this, my drug of choice was this, but me too. We both got addictions because of our trauma. Trauma being main addiction, and these being all the drugs of choice that we choose to try to survive in the illogical ways that we try to survive. Because when we get into our right mind, we say, that's crazy, girl. You know that's crazy. You know that's damaging. Something wrong with you. You working 20 hours a day and you done blown out both of your knees and you still doing this. Something wrong with you. Something. And it is. There's something wrong with me. And so healing really, it's this cycle that says, and then healing is the answer. So those drugs of choice, again, oftentimes, so many of our addictions are to the behavioral drugs of choice, and it's just calling it out. It's bringing honesty back to our healing. In this space, there are some things that say, if you can check this list off, you've been traumatized, and this system says there is a 100% trauma rate in society. All of us got some. All of us can get some of this healing because all of us have issues that keep us from being able to live in love according to the values that we hold that are sustainable. And
again, so thank you for that, because for me, that really is the key differentiator, right? Like, and the beauty of the intensive is that it helps you really to see the patterns pretty quickly, right? Because I'm picking, well, for me, I think I had 6 different incidents, and I love you were very, very good at keeping me disciplined around. Okay, we're doing data collection. I'll say it in that way, right? We're not analyzing because I have an analytical mind, right? And actually, that analytical piece often keeps me from feeling, right? So I'm stuck in the cognitive, right? So now I don't, right? So I'm just gonna rationalize it all out, and I can explain it to you and be disconnected from it at the same time, right? And so that's the beauty of the process, is really looking at, I had 6 different incidents and applying the same process, and not getting into analysis, right? Like until way, 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 way toward the end, and just collecting the data, as you would always say. Like, we're just collecting data, just the facts, right? And then also the emotions and the values also tied to it, right? And and I think in our conversation we talked about how every time that I would start, right, I would have this overflow of emotions and tears, and my system would get a little overwhelmed, but also just sitting and being with it without judgment, but just naming, here are the facts, here's what happened, right? Just the facts, right? And like I said, the emotions tied to it, or my values, right? Yeah, and it helped me to get a really clear picture of patterns later on around, not just around what other people did or didn't do, but my own, as you talked about, right? What are my drugs of choice in relationship to it, right? And what are the, and this was to me one of the most powerful. I had a list of, I don't know, it seemed like 3 pages of losses, right? Losses related to my own behaviors in response. What did I choose, and how were they losses, or how are they losses to me? And I can then afterwards, right, see patterns in those, right? Of yeah, yeah. So yeah. Anyway, yeah.
No, really good. Yeah, that definitely points out some of the mirror work, looking in the mirror
In the
itself.
mirror. Yeah.
A couple of things you mentioned, and maybe this is a 2-part question, really, but
Okay.
talk to me a little bit about whether you had moments where it was hard to stop the doing, the analytical, and just let yourself kind of be held in this process. And then, kind of to piggyback on that, talk a little bit about how your body responded to being in the space where there wasn't the focus on productivity, that it was just about healing. You talked about some of the somatics, and maybe talk about that. Did you have any time where it was hard to stop the doing and the thinking and the analyzing and move into that? And then a little bit about the body responses that you might have experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Every time we would go into a new step in the process, well, let me first start. So again, the first part was really looking at some incidents in my life, some things in my life, and being able to identify them and then write them as just the facts, right? Yeah, that was when. So let me just say this for me. Having done the 30 days, I already knew, what I was getting myself into. Right? So, now it's different though. It's different than 30 days when I was on my own, right? Right. Like it was different, but I knew. So there was full informed consent. So, I knew. I knew I wasn't coming to play, and I know you wasn't gonna play with me, right? So, I
That
knew.
is so true. Like it's about the work. We're gonna do some work while you are here, right?
And you're very clear about that, right? You're very clear about that. And so I knew I'm not coming to play. First of all, I'm not coming to play. I'm not coming to do psychological gymnastics with myself, which I know I have done in my own therapeutic, in where I've done. Listen, I'm telling you, like having been a counselor, sometimes it's difficult for counselors to be in counseling, right? Because you be sitting there, why they ask me that? They should ask me like all kind of stuff. So yeah, so I knew I didn't come to play with me, like me and me. I always be talking with I'm like me and me, like we are being whole conversations, right? And so I went really looking at in the beginning and looking at those incidents and just sitting. That's the other thing. It's for me just sitting in stillness, right? There's a whole process that you also give for the morning, right? Just a suggestion around how to start the morning, right? And some writings to do around that, because I think all of that. And then the beautiful thing also, because I very much relate to music, right? And then you even talk about, well, what's your playlist for the week? Because that all of that is for me is an opening. So I think in coming into this experience, I think all of that lays fertile ground. I'll put it that way. I think it's all intentional and lays fertile ground for an opening to happen, right? And so for me, there was the opening and there was the willingness to do it. And at the same time, when I start writing about some of my experiences, some of it took me into childhood and things I had forgotten about. I'll have to say, let me say repressed, right? And I have repressed them in that, in bringing up the details for me, especially the first two, right? It was as if I was reliving them. I'll just say that. Like as I'm writing the details, I felt the feelings, I smelled the smells, all the things that were happening. And at the same time, because of my own healing work, I also know how to stay grounded and not go into a whole, traumatic thing. Right? I know how to do that too, but enough where I cannot, I can be with it, right, and not dissociate, right? So, and I allowed the tears to come, right? I mean, when the tears wanted to come and I got the ugly cry face and all the things, I just let that be, right? And then being able to look at, well, what are the feelings? And one of the things that I had, I think a part of because of some of my work in the past, I mean, I'm very familiar with the feelings wheel and all that stuff, but really not from a place of cognitive, but like, where do I really feel that in my body, right? And so sometimes there would be opposite feelings happening all at the same time. It'd be like, wait a minute, I got a list of 14 different feelings related to the same thing, right? And then just sitting with that, right? And not trying to push it away. I think a lot of times in my life, it's in the pushing away and being at war with that made them, the war. It was more the war between the feelings and the trying to suppress it that made it so difficult. But just being,
That's the part.
Yeah.
That's the part where so much energy goes into that.
Yeah.
Holding those emotions down, holding them out off the surface.
Yeah.
And it's survival. We do in life, and it seems counterintuitive to let that stuff out. But the reality is when we stuff it, it becomes a disease within our lives. Yeah.
But that's why, again, because I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen in so many healing spaces. I'll tell you the truth, where we do that work of looking at certain incidents and it goes haywire. I'm telling you, it goes all over the place, and people are just, because there's no sacred container. When I say that, it's not a place that can hold it. And when I don't want to minimize, and maybe people might not think about it in this way, but how you go about doing it. Like again, like I mentioned before, that's why I want to say that prong number one that I mentioned is really important. It's from that first contact, how you setting, like, and it's spiritual too. That's the other part of this I have to name, right? That, this to me is very deeply spiritual work, and it's foundational to the work. I don't care what you talk about, religion or whatever. I don't care. It's very spiritual work. And without that spiritual foundation, right? And really having that to set the container also, right? And the values being shown, right, from the first time, and the environment, right? Like, to me, like the environment in the home and all the work and the love and the safety and the grounding and it's like the values are, and it's just going to sound a little weird to some people, but I'm just going to say it because this is the way it's going out. It's like the values are little molecules that are sprinkled around the environment there, right? And so they sit there and they say, I got you. I don't know, right? And so then it feels sacred with joy too. Like, joy could be in the work. So they're talking about, because some people might just think about it as just like, oh, this is painful. No, there would be like the tears, but it was cleansing. It would be like, oh, like a dam would break open, right? Something that had been stuffed and blocked, and all of a sudden all the tears are coming out, and it's like, and I'm like, and then whew, relief, right? And then joy, even to name some very difficult things, right? Then, and that all existed at the same time, but it's all purposeful in terms of the container.
Yeah. In all of that jumbled up together, were there moments of discomfort for you that you feel actually help you shift into something deeper?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So one of the difficulties I think I had, and I think I shared this with you, was in naming the values. And help me out, help me with, because I want to get the language right. Like, when you talk about the values, can you just talk about that so I can answer the question further around how it was difficult for me?
Yeah, and I use a couple of words. I kind of use them interchangeably, even though they're not all the same thing. I talk about values and beliefs and expectations. If people come out of faith traditions, there's a set of beliefs that guides your life, and that may be vocabulary that's similar. But because we don't talk about values a lot, oftentimes it's the expectations that help us really get to the values. What should have happened? You got an idea, and sometimes we don't speak it. What did you expect them to do? How did you expect them to respond? What should your behavior have been in this situation? So those shoulds help you get to the beliefs. If you haven't worked maybe in things like nonprofit circles or corporate world where the core values are spoken about, because usually those are bullet points. I value safety. Because I value safety, I'm moving this sort of way through life. But oftentimes that set of expectations that often in community are unspoken. I expect you to read my mind and know what my expectations are, but we haven't actually had a conversation about that. But I use those to kind of frame that category of thinking. Of what are the values that you filter life through? You got triggered because something didn't feel as if what you expected it to be. Something didn't happen in the way you expected it, or the experience didn't feel the way you wanted it to feel. And so I try to use that umbrella to help guide people into what really is at the core our values. But sometimes it's framed as my expectations, my shoulds.
Yeah.
What my beliefs, I believe that insert response to that.
Yeah. So thank you for that. It was very helpful. And there was another part of it from me when you also talked about there was two parts to it, right? And one was there was a one was like a violation of values, but the other one is that I actually lived into the value. I'm phrasing this wrong.
You got a confliction on this side. Something conflicted with your values. Right. On this side, it aligned with my values.
Right.
So you have both sides. Did what happened meet up to your expectations or your values, or was it a misalignment? And those become the two things, because that definition of trauma is anytime those values, beliefs, or expectation is conflicted. Something happens that doesn't line up with that. That is the ground zero of trauma.
Yeah. And so that, for me, I think getting that part, for me, it was almost like two rivers kind of flowing, right? Really understand that, because again, I think because of my work, right, I understand values, right? And at the same time, sometimes judgment would seep into a behavior that I did, but it helped me to understand that that was really in alignment with my value. So, for example, right, one of my coping mechanism, drugs of choice, had been in different points, and then I had different shifts of drugs of choice, so to speak, in my life. And so one of it was to learn voicelessness, like not saying anything, right? But one of the things I realized is that in some parts of my life, my other value that was really operated in action was staying alive and safety, right? So that was the appropriate thing to do. And that, but see, what would happen would be judgment would come into that, right? Like judgment of self. Well, I should have done that kind of thing. But I realized, one of the things I realized is, hey, there was another operating value that was perfectly appropriate in that situation, in that scenario, right? And so part of it was really those distinctions really made a world of difference to me, right? Like to really, because that's a different level. To me, that's like a whole different level of really understanding myself, right? And what really are my values, right? And then how might that shift in a context, in a certain context? And I think even in values clarification work, I don't know that we go that deep. I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah. If you had to put into your own words, what made this experience feel like healing for you?
Yeah. So, and it brings tears to my eyes actually now. At the end, one of the things that I did was like write, and what do you call it? I don't remember. What do you call it?
5B. I call it 5B. This is where we get into the analysis.
Right.
It's really, the 5B is really where we get out of the just fact collecting. And this is where you talk to yourself. This is the resolution part. It's the opportunity to speak to yourself now that you have the facts on the table in the most loving voice that you can.
Yeah. So, like, one of the things, just for those who are listening, one of the things that my question was like, well, is that a certain way you have to do that, right? And you were like, no. I was like, has anybody ever danced?
Not until now.
And And so when you talk about the healing, but so this brings in another part that I don't know if I really talked a lot about. But part of the process is and again, you can help me with the language of it, is the witnessing. Is that what you call it?
Our Sankofa circle is that time. It's the community integration part. It's the time where we really practice identification,
Right, identification.
connecting and supporting each other in the healing process. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was, I think that was, I don't want to underestimate that part of it. And I know you talked about that even in the 30 days that we did, that you need to have the Sankofa circle. Okay. And I think I underestimated that part maybe in the 30 days. uh, and the part of identification, right? Because often in healing circles, we talk about the witnessing. That's why I came up with that language. There's something a little bit different than with identification. I think it's it's not giving advice. It's not talking about, oh, you know, yeah, there's like rules around it. There's like rules around what to do with it, and it's like, what do I identify with in what you said, right? To me, it's in some ways it's almost like, I don't want to say it's a me too, because I wouldn't say it necessarily like that, but it's something, it might not even be the same thing, but it's something that somebody identifies with the feeling, right? With an emotion. And in that there's this thing that I very much, that I got from visiting in Ghana, and it's the Sawabona, which means I see you as you are. And then the response is Yebo Sawabona. And even though it's identification, right, and not, just picking out what you said, right? It's my identification with what you said within me. It feels very much like Sawabona, right? For me, it feels very much like true practice of community. It feels like true connection. There's an activity I used to do with in groups, and what we would do is at the end, it was a way of closing a group, and we would take a red yarn, and we would, somebody would say something, about their experience, and then they would tie it on their finger, and then they throw it to another person, and they would say something. And then at the end, you would have this real web of connection. And the red represented like the flowing of blood and energy and connection and things like that. And I think the Sankofa circle does that. Now, I started with the what was it? 7B, 6B? What is it?
5B, 5B.
5B. I added 2 more steps, right? With the 5B. The reason I was mentioning that, and then I went backwards, is that the 5B, when you actually, the original question was around the healing part and my experience of it. So in the 5B, there was this culmination, right? My letter to myself, or my whatever, however you want to phrase it, about this journey. And because I very much relate to music, I was like, well, I'm just not going to write out a bunch of things. I was walking out the door. I was going back to my space, right? And the song is an old gospel song. I ain't gonna study war no more, right? So, and it's not like something I've heard like on a regular basis. I might have heard it when I was a little kid, but it just came up to me. That's the other thing that happens in this space, is that you have the opportunity to be with you, and for me and God and the divine speaking to me. Right? So you have that space of silence and listening and divine, as a Queen Afua calls it, impeccable listening. And impeccable listening is, what is the divine saying to you? What is me and me saying to me as well? And so in that was this song, Ain't Gonna Study War No More. And so I wrote about that. I wrote about that was my process, that I ain't gonna study war no more, which is the war within, the war with myself. I've been at war, right? And I've been studying it pretty hard. So, pretty hard. And so I wrote about that. It was more like a poem and kind of thing. But the other part that was really beautiful, so sharing that in the community. And then the other part that was really beautiful is because for me, healing comes out in dance, but dance that was so beautiful in community. And so we danced.
And hula hooped ish.
And hula hooped ish. We did it our way, okay? But new, inventive, creative way. And I guess that's another way, is that when we think about, as we're doing our own internal work and healing internally, and what that means, then when we come in community, there's creativity that happens. And there was nothing that exhibited that more than the dance hula hoop session. because Miss Lorana had the neck hula hoop. She's like, okay, we can't do the hip thing, but we can do the neck. Right?
Hilarious. Hilarious.
Do you know what I'm saying? And so it was the creativity and the joy, and that joy. There's joy in healing, and there's joy in community, and there's joy in connection, which also brings us back to the other part of the other beautiful deep part of your work around community and building these communities that are really about heal people, also people in their journey of healing, coming together and being together in community. And I don't, again, would you want to say a little bit about that, so people understand the larger vision too?
Yeah, like that comes from a place. This work started as really a personal question. I was working in consultancy and saying, you're doing fixing, you're doing program development and organizational design, and people are trying to fix problems. How do you fix community with all its moving parts?
Yeah.
And one of the realizations was that very quickly it was, we fix people. We fix us, the person I can control. But as I begin to heal, it's going to be more difficult to stay in toxic environments.
Yes.
If you're healing, you're trying to get free.
Yeah.
And part of being free is not spending as much energy just in the defense, holding the outside world out, holding the damage potentials out. And it was a realization that as individuals really connect with a healing lifestyle, I'm talking about deep healing, transformational healing, we've got to create communities that can support the healed existence, where more and more of our life is lived by living these sustainable values in real time. Proximity. There's a level of support that has to do with that. And in a framework that allows for diversity.
Yeah.
That what I need for community may be different than what you need, that neither is wrong, but that community is a scalable size container for us to live out our values in real time. And so part of this work recognizes that we have to create spaces that also support healing lifestyles. For
Mhm.
me, the intentional community movement is a very good model
Yeah.
to build the convertible community concepts on, the intentional village work that I do.
Mhm.
It starts with healing. It's
Mhm.
saying if those people who are doing the work as a commitment to living healthy, healing lifestyles were to come together, wouldn't those be places where we could feel good about living in community? Otherwise, community is painful. Right now,
Yes.
interacting in community is painful. Like if we're being honest and our damage bumps against the next person's damage and we both leave the situation worse,
Yes.
we've got to have communities where the opposite swing of that pendulum is happening, where as I heal,
Mhm.
interacting with me is less toxic,
Right.
more and more. Interacting with you is less toxic, more and more.
Mhm.
Community becomes a sum that's better than our individual parts together.
Mhm.
Even as we're in society where coming together makes us worse sometimes,
Yes.
it's what is the opposite. The opposite says, as we get better, we need places that allow for that healing, that not only allow for it, but support it. And so the global underground railroad, one is a container, but in the literal sense, it's how do we connect those places, the people and the places and the tools that help us to be socially sustainable. And the world is open to us. So places that are in all different locations where healing people are,
Yeah.
that's kind of the literal expression of this work, that yes, it is us, but at the same time, because community has all these moving parts that are happening at the same time, how do we begin building places, physical places where healing first is the foundation that we're building community on? Because I think that is the strongest foundation we can build community on. And Lord knows we need strong foundations for the kinds of changes that we need or that we want to see in community.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really important. I think that was another thing that really, that's why I wanted wanted you to name that, because that was another thing that really drew me to your work as well. Is that, again, in my own practices, in my own listening, in the mornings, I usually, I'm just kind of sitting and seeing what comes up. And there's this article that came across I don't know, somehow, I don't know where it came from, but it was around mutual aid groups, right? And I start reading about that. And then again, I was talking to someone and they said, well, whatever's happening in the world, that, our ancestors, have gone through worse and da da da. And it just came, I'm like, but we're not our ancestors. Really? So, and not only that, when we talk about trauma, that we've inherited trauma, as well as, right, we also have inherited like resilience practices and healing practices from our ancestors. But there's a lot of that has not been healed in terms of the trauma, right? And in terms of just the basics, in terms of resources, like our ancestors knew how to forage, they knew how to make stuff out. I mean, most of us, if we without our cell phone for 15 minutes and we can't find it, we're going crazy. And so that's the other part of it in terms of your work, right? So we're talking about healing, which is foundational, but we're also talking about some other kind of things about moving within the world that are practical. Right? How do we build sustainable communities, as you talk about that? I mean, can you say a little bit about that and your work around that so that people
Yeah,
know what else? Yeah.
it's the both and.
Yeah.
It's addressing what's wrong
Yeah.
in as many of the moving parts as we can. Can we impact as many of those moving parts to move this pendulum back in the other direction, back towards center? And so this work talks about building life-embracing resilient communities. We've got several projects that are in various stages right now. We're building physical spaces, but even here, being able to have the space for individuals to come and live in residency, whether it's short-term or long-term. And the vision is really about finding individuals who feel called to these areas of work and saying, let's heal first so that we're better capable of doing this work together. The social tech work isn't the solution. It's the foundation. It says, what do we need? Which cogs need to start turning so that we can build the solutions? And it's a real strategic approach that says roof over head and food on the table. Healing, roof over head, and food on the table are three criticals that if you have those, life kind of continues. If you don't, life gets really painful. And so my work has specifically focused on that foundation, the infrastructure of community wellness and the bridges that we have to build to do that. But it's also very practical in saying we know how to solve the problem for homelessness. We know how to solve housing. We can do it quite affordably now if we want to. Oh, wait, but if you get people together and they haven't dealt with their greed or the reason for hoarding resources, that mentality of lack or never enough, and we got to get it all instead of there being enough for, if we don't do, those are values. And if we don't deal with those first, then even doing the work together becomes traumatizing. So we get worse the longer we work together. And so it's saying, this is not the solution for everything, because you and whoever else may have parts of their own purpose that are the solutions. What's your genius for helping us restore humanity? But it's saying, if we do this first, now we can come to the table and figure out how our passions overlap, where we have connection and feel called to do parts of those works together. But in a real practical way, it says, the reality is sometimes we have to do the roof overhead and food on the table so we can buy the emotional energy to do the healing work. And so those have been really the central parts of this work. What's the formula to get us on the right track? Which cogs do we start turning? And the first part is build a strong foundation. Build a foundation strong. If you want to build a big world, build it on a strong foundation. That's right. And I believe that healing allows us to do that with enough flexibility to really take into it our diversity. My values are not going to align completely with yours, but if we have the tools, and I learn how to deal with yours and to find where we have points of connection and points of disconnection and how to deal with that in real time. And so it is about how we heal community. How do we re-pioneer society? And I really believe that we have to start with the core, which is, it takes us back to something you said about this being spiritual work. Our core, the core of our being, the core of our existence, the place that we get those values and beliefs from. If we start there, then everything else has a potential of taking us in this direction. It's getting as close to that center as we can, and then move from there, course correcting all along the way. Every time something triggers us, course correction. Course correction. Let me heal another layer. Which stuff do I work on? The stuff that shows up. Life is this is a system that relies on life being the curriculum. I can't map out your healing journey for you. I don't know what you need to work on today. You need to work on what shows up, or at least you have the opportunity to. And so it's being able to say it's both, and it's working on it from the bottom and the top, because some of this is systemic work, organizational work. How do we create new organizations, new ways to do business, new ways to do enterprise? It's both and. But even that, it says, this is the part of it that I can deal with me. I can control me 100%. I got control over me, or at least I should, or I have the right to be in control of me. How about we start with the stuff that we can actually control? Because I can't control you. I may see what I think may need to be healing in you, but I can control me. And that feels sustainable.
That's amazing. And thank you for that. One of the things that I didn't mention, that I did want to mention, that I hear you over and over again. You always say, I would say that like every day, about being honest, right? Being that, I mean, I think that's such a it sounds simplistic, but it's such a critical pillar of being honest with ourselves. And I know for me in the listening, even before, and I think again, I think from the spiritual place that God has really been, you know, God, the divine, whatever you call, right? But it really has been tenderizing, and again, this is part of my journey. Is I remember when I was in Thailand on the beach, and I heard, but it was started before that actually. But I wrote a whole thing about ego, right? So, but it was about me. It hadn't been to anybody else. That was about me, Latise. But really showing me about that and what and how it shows up in multiple ways, right? Even in sometimes a false sense of humility, which is really from a place of not even valuing ourselves, right? And so yeah, so I think that piece when you talk about getting honest with ourselves is so incredibly important.
I definitely think our ability to heal has a direct correlation to our ability to be honest with
Got
ourselves. And that too is a progressive journey, more and more, poco y
it.
poco, that we're
Yeah,
able to be honest with us when we look in the mirror.
yeah.
Let me switch. You mentioned this, and I want to go there as we kind of take this conversation um, around the bend and back. I often say that this work
This
is
is my
spiritually
cord.
rooted.
So keep on
Okay,
talking. I'm just gonna
so
grab my cord.
sure. I often talk about this work being spiritually rooted, not
Yes.
religion bound per se,
Hmm.
but that it holds room for spirit and breath and truth.
Yes.
And really want to get your feedback. How did that sit with you? I'll throw a couple questions out and you can kind of see
Okay.
what resonates, but how did that sit with you? And how did your spiritual body respond to this container? And was it any different perhaps than containers with somatic and clinical spaces that you've been in?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll actually start with again the 30-day journey. And in the 30-day journey, I read the whole book, right? So I know we were starting on what chapter 16, I think. I think we started there. But that's how I am. I want the whole picture, right? And so one of the things that was really impactful for me in the book, you talked about, you named the quotes from different spiritual backgrounds and patterns. And so I do quite a bit of travel. People think that my travel is like, I don't know, I just want to see the world. And it's really not just about that. It's like, I feel a calling. I mean, and it's not even, well, where am I just looking to move? I mean, it's like I could be sitting somewhere. I'm sitting and I hear something, I feel a calling, like I felt a calling to come, right? And I feel a calling. And part of it is in terms of my spiritual practice, is really in terms of the connection and really listening to and learning from and being in relationship with, whether it's the trees or the, right, or tilling the earth, doing my garden, all that kind of thing. So but the thing is that I would say, going back to your question around the spiritual part of this, I think one of the things that really helped me, and I don't know that I made this connection before, was going back to values. For me, that felt really spiritual, right? Like, I don't know, it fit like really clarifying. And then I asked me, then it begged of it, well, where did this come from? And where, and so for me, again, having different spiritual practices already, right? And again, I went through a whole, I won't get into, I grew up in a very religious kind of Pentecostal, this is the only way, whatever kind of thing. And okay, that's, for, I'm talking about my experience. And so for me, it has been um really listening to what God is saying to me in relationship. So let me just put it that it's not religion, it's relationship. And part of being pulling away from all the noise, all the stuff, like, what social media says and what this says or this, all this, and just sitting, right? Sitting and being, and also being in a place, I will say, in Cuenca, right, in Ecuador, to me it's a very spiritual place as well. And you can help me with this, but what is it? It's the place where four rivers.
It is. It's we're in a valley up in the Andes Mountain at about 8,000 feet. And
Yeah.
the official name is Santa Maria of the Four Rivers of Cuenca or something like that. It's a very long name, but there's four rivers that come here, filled with water coming out of the mountains that then connect into the Tomibamba River, which runs into the Amazon and out to the Atlantic. So it's taking the waters from the Pacific coast that we're on and traveling across this continent. And so this place has some historical significance for the Incans. The Incan Trail comes through here. This is a space that they would have come to, Pachamama Hill, or places where they would have come and done ceremony, and it would have been holy ground in a lot of regards. So there's that history of this space.
Yeah. And I think, again, when we talk about sacred space and, that the atmosphere, and how we go into certain atmosphere and you be like, that's not right. I feel that something ain't right here. Right. And so I think it's all of that, is the connection with environment, is it in connection with the people who are also have a spirit of kindness. Right. I think for me, God shows up in us, right? Like, and how we relate to each other as well. And so all of that is that spiritual grounding of not only a place, but also the principles and relationship to values, right? Like, really helping us to really sit with that in the place of values. But also sometimes words escape me. I don't have the words to express what I'm trying to say. I'm at a loss for words, right? And so part of that is also the opening up, right? It's like I described it, the opening up of the places within me that have been damned, right? It's also the listening and the hearing, and hearing God whisper to me in a small voice, I ain't gonna study war no more. You understand what that's spiritual. That is deeply spiritual. It's spiritual to me to hula hoop in community. I mean, to me, that is it. That's how I see it. It's very connection and creative and connect. So it's like I'm here. I'm here. I'm in community with divine, but I'm also here in community with you. And there's nothing more spiritual than that. And being seen, being fully seen, right? And being held, right? And the flow of the four rivers, right? Right, which to me is the washing, the unblocked plate, the unblock those places so that they could be full flowing, so that abundance happen by rivers, right? Like things grow and they could be fertile ground, right? And there's some washing away, right? And so all of that is deeply spiritual. I hope that makes sense. I
Yeah,
think it'll make
thank you.
sense to those who it needs to make sense to.
Yeah. And I really, that was very affirming for me that this is about holding space
Yeah.
for those that are coming for healing
Yes.
first, for their
Yeah.
own healing first.
Yeah.
And towards that end, the spiritual piece, were there any truths that you came away with from this experience that weren't about technique, but that were really about you? What kind of truths were you able to leave here with?
Yeah. I think one of the major things that I haven't shared this with with many people yet. I haven't had the opportunity. And then I'm also mindful of when and how I share too. So let me put it that way. But one of the biggest pieces for me was when I did the list, right? And the list was the original trauma, right? That list of original trauma, right? What the incident did to me. And then we categorized, or I categorized it in terms of individual relationship and then family, right? And then the other part was my survival responses. This was, for me, it just it blew my mind. Mind isn't just the right word for it, but that's the only one I can come up with. But that piece around the coping mechanisms, the losses I created, the losses that I created, because it was my survival responses, right? And how it cost me. And I'm telling y'all, I have a whole list. Now, this was this list that I'll just share it with you quickly, was related. It was like themes. Now I broke it down from probably a list of 3 pages, right, to some things. But again, these are coping mechanisms, what it cost me, the losses. And I put a loss of peace, joy, self-trust, dignity, healthy and stronger relationships, growth, happiness, abundance, friendships, authenticity, connection, being supported and supporting others, ability to resolve conflicts, opportunities, balance, healthy boundaries, energy, growth, financial wealth, help, my own voice, health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, development, resources, peace, rest, ease, and connection with God, connection to God. Now, all of those are not as a result of what the original trauma or incident, what somebody did to me, but that was a result of my own survival responses, my coping mechanisms, my drugs of choice. And I'm not talking about doing drugs, so don't y'all get twisted, right? But as Lana was saying, like the things I did, I have people in my family who have an addiction to drugs, but it helped me see, girl, look at all the stuff you do.
If we're being honest.
If we're being honest, right? If I'm being honest, right? And so just really sitting with that, right? Not what someone did, but the way that I responded or reacted, or my the losses that I created. Ooh, and then just sitting that and then coding that in terms of individual, related to myself, relationships, right? Family, right? And so how that also impacts beyond just me, my choices. Wow, right? There's the principle of 7 generations that come from, my understanding is it's from indigenous Native American indigenous tribe, is about the principle of 7 generations, how we inherit 7 generations before us, but then also what we do today impacts 7 generations to come, right? And I'm like, whoa, right? This whole principle of cycle breakers and cycle makers. So where am I? You know what I mean? What am I as the person who's in the healing profession, right? I have to look at me. And what are my values? How do I want to be in this world? do I want to keep on causing trauma to myself? Right? Right. And so, and also to others, right? To others as well. And how do I go about doing that? And I think, yeah, to me, that's been the most impactful. I will also further say one, one of my, mostly, and I'll just be quite candid about this, what I worked on in terms of was incidents related to my mom. And so since I've been home, there's been opportunities presented.
Life is the curriculum.
Where I'm doing this, I'm going, okay, right? You know, you understand what I'm going through. And not that I lived into the value. I know, no. But I was able to step back from it and then examine the process and use the process, right? And then go through the whole process, right? And because I was in the practice of it, right, doing it over and over again, I think it's the ongoing, it's not the experience of just 7 days, is how do I live this every day, right? So yeah, so that's the part. That's the part.
Thank you for sharing really your personal
Yeah.
revealing in the process, and sharing from your experience.
Yeah.
You mentioned about healers. You
Yeah.
mentioned about, those that are in our society that take on this role of helping people heal. And I want to spend just a few minutes before we leave talking about that, because that's an important space and one that you have been in professionally.
Yeah.
You've worked inside of systems, nonprofit and corporate and academia,
Mhm.
but you've also now experienced part of the social tech, which is completely outside of those frames, those traditional frames. And I'd like to really hear maybe what that opened up for you, and maybe just some insight from that professional vantage point of what you feel the future of emotional health and safety and
Yeah.
trauma work could look like if it were centered in community and rhythm and rest, in some
Yeah.
of the ways that you got to experience. Maybe just share from your professional vantage point,
Yeah.
and even you mentioned about practitioners.
Yeah.
How could this be a part of how practitioners, who many are burned out or
Yeah.
boxed in,
Yeah.
um, how this may be relevant in those spaces where we start talking about the systemic parts of community. Maybe just share some insight or what comes up for you in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a real important question, especially in the spaces in which I move. And so I'll just step back for a minute and say that let me see, it's probably been like a year, 2 years ago. Again, that's why the spiritual part is very important. And in my morning devotion, God just kind of laid it on my heart about this whole concept of who heals the healers, right? And I did some workshops around that, and I think, and I'll also say this, that I've also, so I'm in Buffalo, New York, right? We had the Tops massacre that happened here. I think it's been a few years ago now, and where a white supremacist came into our community. Predominantly, had done some research around where there was a large population of Black people, quite honestly, and scoped out the supermarket and end up killing a number of people and things like that. The reason I bring that up is that since that time, there's been, particularly in my community, a lot of conversation about healing, right? And healing from a systemic level, right? And you know, a lot of people who are in the healing profession who actually flocked in from different places around the country. And the other part of it is that out of all of that, and not just that, but it's just something that came to the forefront of my mind. But out of that, like people have been talking a lot about healing, and all that. I'm like, and my question, I'm a researcher also, right? Like my question, what is healing? What does that mean? Because it's just like something that's out there. What does that really mean? Right. And so I think like we talked about already, the way, you know, you talk about healing, right? I think it's a different way of really looking at it. And it's an in-depth, but it's also communal at the same time, right? It's both individually and communally. And so most of the time, I've been doing a lot of organizational work for a long period of time. And I was like, oh, I just want to work in the community. And I know in my time with God, people spend most of their time in organizations throughout the day. Right? Where all kind of harm is happening and all the different things that are happening. And so it you know, and again, in the rush and the grind culture, all of that, it's all about producing and how we work and all the things, right? And so I think it's really important when we talk about those, especially those of us, well, everybody, right? Because we all spend a lot of time within these systems and these organizations where so much harm is happening. And so much harm is happening in the name of healing, right? Like the people who are in the healing spaces are just sometimes, and it's systemic around where there's the creation of the scarcity of resources. So I'm gonna cut your throat in the helping professions in our nonprofit worlds, and right, so I can get the resources to go help the people, where I'm also victimizing the people in the same way as the oppressive system. Is madness, right? Like, and so that's why I think this framework is so important. Like really, because what happens is that we come up with new names for stuff. Okay, we can't use this name for it. We'll use this name for it now. Oh, it's the same. You know, there's one of the things that we talked about is the cycle of socialization and the cycle of liberation. We're socialized in the same system. And the whole concept is that the oppressed become the oppressor. But we're all oppressors and oppressed, right? But it's this system, and it lives in all of our organizations, even and sadly, we might talk about it in corporate, right? But even in those nonprofit places that are meant to be helping, and I see how much harm happens, right? And so this is critical for our systems, for our communities, for ongoing harm. And it's not just this big, large harm, but it's these systems where harm is continuing to happen, even in the name of helping. I've been working on a book for years around what happened to the human in human services, right? Because I've just seen so much harm. And so, you know, it's really, and it doesn't matter by the way, your skin color. Okay. Don't matter. That don't matter. Right.
100% trauma rate.
Right. 100% trauma rate. And so that's why this framework of having, as you talked about, the foundational system, like, yeah, we need to, you know, before people can hear sometimes those basic needs being met, but healing is the foundation. And then having and I know we talked about this. You mentioned this to me around um, the the research behind it, also in terms of the effectiveness around it, and how it's truly most of us have some form of post-traumatic stress syndrome. And then Dr. Joy DeGruy, for us who are of African American descent or of African descent, talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Like we still have those things that are operating. So it's necessary. It's necessary in the organizations, in the systems in which we work with, to begin with healing. We have to. Otherwise, we operate and replicate the same systems in the name of justice. Yeah.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I just have appreciated you sharing and being able to speak to this from the professional space, from within.
Yeah.
Um, as we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
We could go on and on. Uh, but as we leave this time together, I really want to give you an opportunity to speak to two specific groups of people or to share some wisdom. What would you say, one, to practitioners who may be burned out or feel boxed in
Yeah.
into their spaces, but also what would you say to someone who may be listening, who may be feeling tired and high performing and yet secretly aching and possibly scared to let go? What kind of parting wisdom can you give, both from your professional space, maybe to those within your profession,
Yeah.
but also to individuals, just regular folk who may be really dealing with life in a
Yeah.
way that life feels heavy?
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Um, I think well, one of the things that I I think from a divine spiritual place is that that's why I love the Sawabona. So I'll say this first is that I'm going back to the Sawabona, which means we see you as you are, right? And then the response back is Yebo Sawabona, which means we exist for you. But within that, the we is the I. Can we see ourselves? Right? That's a very important part of this work. And so for those of us who are practitioners, who are, and again, I mean, I've trained social workers and psychologists and in universities and all of those different places. And what I often see is so much pouring out that they don't even, it's almost like they've made themselves insignificant, as if they don't matter, right? That it's always about pouring out, pouring out, pouring out, pouring out, to detriment, to sickness, to illness, to mental, emotional, all the different things, right? Where, like, I was working with a group of people who are counselors, psychologists, like all the helping professions. And I asked them, I'm like, what is it that you need? And they were like, they couldn't even name it. Or I asked, what do you do in your own healing journey? They couldn't name it. They couldn't name it. Or if they did, it was events. I go to the spa. I take a vacation. Right? Like, it's all these events, right? These events. And it's like I'm wearing myself down. And this might be to anybody. I'm wearing myself down, waiting for a time frame. And most people are not living. They are not living. They're barely surviving. Barely surviving. And so this is, I think, for me, is that first of all, I want to say first to you, Lorana, that God has given you this gift of truly of your own journey first. I'll say that your own journey to healing, right? And I also see my journey the same way, my own journey in healing, but not just for me, but also as and also in your impeccable listening, right? To be able to put it down as a gift for other people, as a pathway, not to do it alone, not for healing to be alone, right? But it's also in that right community. And how do we build communities where healing is the foundation? There's a way. There is a way forward, even in difficult times. There is a way forward if we come together in community and say, whew, yeah, I got some stuff. But I also have a community who can hold it and can have some healthy accountability, because that's the other part that you talk about as well. Healthy accountability, and can put some boundaries in so that we don't continue to hurt each other, even in healing communities, right? That's so important. So I just want to say to you that that you're seen, that you're valued, that you're loved. And because this is spiritual, it comes from divine for each one of you, because you are seen, because I am seen, and if you hear Lorana's story, because she's seen and you're so valuable. And there's places and community and messages that have been given and tools and ways of being that we can do. We can help each other in community because you're valuable and you're worth it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That is this work.
Yeah.
Thank you for expressing it and perhaps encapsulating it. The social tech work, the convertible community work, the global underground railroad work is that work of how
Yes.
do we do that? How do we start the process?
Yes.
And you've heard it over and over from me. We started with healing first.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Latise,
Thank you.
for your willingness to invest time in sharing this so that we can share this work with others, but
Yes.
so that you and I have time to really process the experience for both of us. Thank you for your insightful and really heart-centered reflection
Yeah.
on your experience, your own healing journey, and just all of life that intertwines. Thank you for allowing yourself to be held in this process, in this space, and for being willing to share that and to tell your truth about it this morning. I think, this conversation really matters because there are so many of us, not just Black women, not just women, not just
Yeah.
healers, not just helpers, not just
Yeah.
leaders, the modern day shaman who really carry so much. And sometimes we have not been given help with knowing how to stop. But your presence here today really makes space, hopefully, for others to be able to say that maybe I too can rest and deepen my healing journey. So I appreciate you giving this time. And my hope is that listeners may possibly be able to recognize themselves in some of this conversation, and to know that we don't have to wait until we get broken all the way.
No.
That we don't have to earn our restoration or perform healing to be worthy, that we can just be and be held and begin again if that's what it takes. And so thank you for giving time today. This season of the podcast is intentionally called Testimony in Progress. I think that all of our stories and the work that we're doing here so often isn't polished, but I really believe it's sacred work, and
That's
and
right.
it's a slower process, I know, than some of the modalities perhaps want us to believe, but I believe it's honest work and it's holy work.
Yes,
And
it
I
is.
appreciate you sharing in this time. Any closing thoughts that are just on your heart as we kind of close this time out today?
Mhm. Oh, well, I just want to thank you again. Thank you for your generosity of spirit, and your kindness. And I mean, I don't know how much, and people watching your videos understand how much joy you have in play, right? Yeah, because, and I think maybe in this life, right? How important that is, right? I know I was listening to was in a Native American indigenous woman talk, and she was talking about this, and this really kind of reminds, I don't know why this is coming, but it reminds me of you, right? And I just wanted to say this about you, is that she was talking about when someone becomes human, and she said that the first time, when the first person that hears a baby laugh, right, throws a party, because that's when they become human. That's it. And so, in this journey of healing, I just want, because maybe we don't always think about it, is like joy and playfulness. And I don't know how much people get to see that of you, which I mean, I so appreciate as well. And so, for all of us to have joy and playfulness and childlike, undefiled ways of freedom, that's so important. And that's also what you bring to the world, despite all of the things that you've been through, and because of all the things you've been through, and you still have joy. And I so appreciate that about you. And I listen, I'm going to be continuing in my healing journey with you as well. We got to talk about that. So
Indeed. No, I thank you so much for that. Yeah, joy and play. And the reality is, I was carrying a lot of boulders, heavy boulders, the
yeah,
stuff, the
yeah,
damage, sometimes at the hands of other people, and a lot of times at the hands of me.
yeah,
And freeing up the energy in my life
yeah,
has left room for my passion play, the
yeah,
passion work that I do. Part of the center is my passion work, but the play, the joy,
yeah.
finding it in all kinds of places with all kinds of people,
Mhm.
having the time and the energy to be able to feel life. Once those boulders are removed, to feel life with things that fuel me,
Yeah.
that feel like love, that feel like healing water. Like
Mhm.
that for me is what my healing gives me. Part of
Mhm.
what it gives me, but those are the things that life now can hold more of.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give my share, and anybody else's that leaves theirs on the table, I'm going to find their share too if I can.
I'm with you. I'm with
Yes.
you.
Whether it be a dance party or my hula hoops, I just moved them to a new corner. Uh, so thank you so much,
Thank
Latise,
you.
and sharing with us. Thank you for being a part of this healing work that we're doing. By
Yeah.
you taking your healing, you too are an ambassador of what healing as a lifestyle can be in the places that you go, in the
Yeah.
people that you come in contact with. My prayer and my hope is that each one of them will be better
Yeah.
because of the interaction with you and the
Yeah.
healing commitments that you've made. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll see them the next time on the next episode of Testimonies in Progress. We'll see each other in these international streets, I'm sure, but thank you for being a part of this work and sharing the work of healing in the places that you go.
Thank you.